Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Before we start this video, I just want to give an apology. My voice probably sounds really crazy in this video. I'm right now dealing with like the absolute worst allergy attack and allergy meds are not working at all. So we're just gonna have to roll with it for this video. Hopefully by my next video it will be a little bit better. But today we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read in April. I've been kind of struggling the past like 2 to 3 months with a book slump. Now, if you watch any of those reading wrap-ups, you might think by like the quantity of books that I'm reading, hey girl, that's not a reading slump. But the past couple of months I've been having to kind of force myself to read, not that I come home from work and I just want to pick up a book. But this month I was definitely allowing myself to mood read, reading genres that I was just interested in or books that I was just interested in. I'm starting to get that spark of just wanting to read again for fun. So well, that is great. This month definitely is a very odd month for reading just because of the content of books that I was reading. I feel like it's pretty similar to kind of like last month. I don't know why, but I've been very much in a non-fiction, historical fiction, literary fiction mood. I've not been loving fantasy. I've been enjoying books that like take not a lot of brain power, which makes sense if I wasn't wanting to read in the first place. I just want to read books that are pretty easy to read. I read 10 books. One of them was an audiobook, and then on top of those 10 books, I also did DNF one book. So I, in total this month, technically read 11 books. I am going to start with the books that I do not have physical copies of, just so that I don't forget to talk about them. First off, the audiobook that I listened to this month was Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I absolutely adored this book. I gave this book a 5-star on Goodreads, but for me it feels like a 6-star. This book and another book that I read this month just felt like they were books that were written for me. If you do not know, or I don't know why you really would know, I think I talked about it in one video, but I played tennis throughout high school, or technically middle school. I quit because I was getting bullied when I was in tennis, and so I had this really weird relationship with tennis. And when this book started first getting talked about, I didn't want to read it because it was tennis related, but throughout reading this book, it just reminded me of my love for tennis. It is such a beautiful book. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing. This is about, obviously, Carrie Soto, who is retired from tennis. She is about to have her world record beaten by another player, and she is a character who is, some people would consider her kind of frustrating and that she has a big ego, but she is someone who works so hard for what she has, and she knows that she's the best at tennis. So she decides to come out of retirement to prove that she is the GOAT of tennis, and you follow her and her dad, who is her coach, throughout the tennis season, going to these different tournaments and everything. I had such a great time reading that, or listening to the book technically, but it was so good. I recommend it if you've not read it yet. I know some people get like very nervous because it is a very tennis heavy book. There is a little bit of romance at the end. For the most part, it is just a story of a young girl and all of the things that she had to go through to become who she is now, and it's just, I love that book so much. So that I listened to, gave it a 6-star. And then the other book that I do not have a physical copy of, I read from my library on Libby through my Kindle, and it is That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. Now this I actually read in my last video, which was a weekly reading vlog. I gave this a 3.5. It is a YA thriller book, and in the start of the book we meet our one main character who wakes up on the side of a road. She is in a lot of pain, but she has amnesia. She does not remember her name. She doesn't remember like anything. That's what amnesia is. We follow her throughout the story where she is slowly gaining her memories back, and you don't know if the people she's with have good intentions for her. And then there is a second storyline that you're also following in the book of another main character who is this boy whose girlfriend went missing, and everyone in the town thinks that he murdered her. I really enjoyed the book. I thought it was super fast paced. I believe I read it in like a day and a half. I just really enjoyed it. It was really good. If you can find it on Libby, definitely read it, give it a chance. Those were the books that I do not have physical copies of, and now we're going to get into the books that I do have physical copies of. The first book that I technically read this month was Goddesses in Greek Myth, Divine Might by Natalie Haynes. Now, when I first bought this at Barnes, I thought this was going to be just a retelling of these Greek goddesses and their stories, but it's actually more of a literary analysis synopsis. It's an essay for each of the different goddesses. It is really cool because actually on the different chapters there's a photo of the goddesses, and then it just goes straight into kind of the essay. I read this book and I actually ended up buying a copy of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I really want to read that sometime soon. In this book, it talks about the Muses, Hera, Aphrodite, Artemis, Demeter, Hestia, Athene, and the Furies. So I absolutely love Greek goddesses and the whole world and lore and just the stories of anything to do with Greek gods and goddesses. So I was very interested in reading this and I really did enjoy it. It was in the time this month that I just wanted to learn. I didn't want to read fiction. So I thought that this was a great read. Because this book is technically more so learning, I didn't actually rate this, but I did have a really good time reading it. If you are interested in Greek gods and goddesses and all of those things, I would really recommend this because I learned so much through this. But if you are not interested in that or historical fiction at all, I would stay away from this. You're probably not going to enjoy this book. And then this month I decided to reread the Hunger Games series. Now originally when I was doing this reread, I actually was vlogging it, but I ended up scrapping that video just because I ended up actually reading these two books pretty much while I was at work, so it's not like I could vlog it. I did, like, if you go through my copies, I have so many underlines. While I was reading these, I was definitely looking for, you know, clues of things that happened between Snow and Lucy Gray. There are so many things in this first book that are direct callbacks to the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and it was such a good time. One of my goals for reading this year was to reread some books from my childhood. This was definitely the series that got me into reading. I have such vivid memories of being a kid and reading Catching Fire, like start to finish, in my parents' lazy boy chair that we had. And yeah, I had such a great time with this. This is your sign to go back and reread old childhood books, especially like if you're in a reading slump. It just reminds you why you love reading, and also I think it's so fun to feel like a little kid again. I had such a great time reading this, and especially when you already know the story, go back and reread it to specifically annotate things and try and learn more about the world. The world is just, it's so amazing what this author was able to do with this story. Obviously it is a YA dystopian from like the 2010s, so it's not a literary masterpiece, but it is a very interesting storyline, and yeah, I had a really good time with that. Technically, this is just a 5-star series, but I did rate these two 5-star, and then this last one, I believe I gave a 4 or a 4.5. I've just never really loved the last book, but these two are by far my favorites out of the series. Next, we have my one DNF from the month. I fell victim to one of those TikToks where it is a quote and then they try and sell you their book, and this is Speed Trap by Ray Aiden. I don't know anything about this author, so I don't want to shit on this book too hard because I believe this is like one of their first books that they've written. I'm not really sure. But what this is supposed to be, when I saw the TikTok, it was supposed to be a book that is based on a F1 reporter and then a character who is supposed to be like Lando Norris. And if you know me, that is my man. I love him so much. I wish him the best in every race. You know, like that's my boy. Team Papaya forever. But then I got the book, and first off, I had to buy the book on Amazon because it's a smaller author. No problems with that. Like, if you can't see it, there is glue pouring out of the front of the book. The book is so, like, it's such shitty quality. I think the quality of the book bind up really affects the feeling you get when you're reading it. So that's one thing. I think I got 50 pages into this book before I DNF'd it because I quickly realized that this is actually like the Mindfuck series X an F1 romance, but I did not like the writing. I did not think it was good writing. I didn't like it, so I DNF'd it. No hate to the author or anything like that. I've honestly been trying to find a good F1 romance that's not the Dirty Air series, so if any of you guys have any other F1 romance books recommendations, let me know, because I think F1 romances are my favorite sport romances, obviously because F1 is my favorite sport. I don't know. I didn't like that book, so I just DNF'd it because at this part of the month I was actively trying trying to get out of my reading slump and I was starting to get out of my reading slump, I did not need to push myself through a book that I did not want to read and then put myself back into it. But the next book that I read definitely took me out of my reading slump. I, like everyone else this month, read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, which first off, I did not know that Abby Jimenez is from Minnesota. Minnesota represent, let's go. I actually really want to go to, she's the owner of Nadia Cakes. I've never been there before. I've actually never heard anyone ever talk about Nadia Cakes, but I guess it's popular, I don't know. But this book takes place in Minnesota, so I was having so much fun because every like date that they were going on, I knew where it was. I will say, if you're from Minnesota, some of the things that happen in this book, you're kind of like, damn, they're spending a good 2-3 hours in a car to go drive to this place. But this is about our two main characters. Our one main character, Emma, is a travel nurse, and she has this curse where every person who she dates, the next person that they date meets or is the love of their life. And then Justin, who is our other main character, has the same curse. And how they meet is he actually posts a Reddit story about Am I the Asshole, which is a real actual Reddit like sub thing. I don't know actual terms for Reddit. She sees the post on Reddit and messages him being like, hey, I have the same exact thing. They end up meeting from there. She comes to Minnesota and you follow them going on all of these dates. There is a lot of talk about, you know, some mental health things. There is a lot to do with familial relationships. He has to be basically a parent for his younger siblings in this book, and she is dealing with a really bad relationship with her mom throughout this book. I absolutely ate this book up. I felt like a lot of this book was like directly written from me. Obviously, I'm from Minnesota, so like I felt a spiritual connection to it, and I thought it was so cute when they would, you know, there's this one scene where I think they're having spaghetti and they have garlic bread, but it was either like leftover hot dog buns or hamburger buns. They talk about just a lot of like Midwest Minnesota things in this book, and I thought it was really cute. I absolutely loved this book. I gave this a 6 star. I think the most unrealistic thing about this book is that a guy named Justin, who acts like our male main character in this book, he would never exist in Minnesota, let alone Minneapolis. The dating scene is horrendous. And then my next 2 books, again, are kind of in that sort of, I was not really wanting to read fiction stories. So this is The Book of Eve by Carmen Belosa, and it is translated by Samantha Schnee. What I thought this was going to be a retelling of the story of Adam and Eve, but from Eve's perspective, because that's literally like what this is branded to be. It is that, but it's from a perspective of just someone who hates men in a not helpful way. Like, it felt like she was just shitting on men just to shit on men. It just wasn't what I was expecting. I didn't like it. I did not rate it, but I did finish the book. And maybe I didn't really enjoy it as much as some other people do, because I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore. I grew up and was raised Catholic, so that's kind of why I was more so interested in this book in the first place. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and I was a little disappointed with it, especially because this is literally a on the cover, and I thought that was so funny and cool. But yeah, I read this. It is what it is. I wouldn't recommend it. Moving on. The next book that I read is a book that I've been reading for a couple months at this point. I think I've been reading this for like 2 or 3 months at this point, and this is The Creative Act: A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. I've been talking about this on my channel like non-stop, so I'm so excited to talk about this so we can move on. This is a book that is a non-fiction, and it is kind of one of those books that is meant, it's like a self-helpy book where you're supposed to read it, you're supposed to take what you take out of it and then just put it on your shelf and never think about it again. Not in a negative way. I hate when people shit on these types of books, because if you just take what it pulls out of you instead of literally taking word for word what the book is talking about, then you're going to actually enjoy your reading experience with this. Big reason why I was reading this is because I was having a hard time with coming up with YouTube ideas and getting out of this circle of consuming content and not creating content. So I decided to read this. I will say this is heavily based on the creative act within regards to creating music. So I don't know if everyone would like this, but I have heard a lot of people do like this. If you've been thinking about it, I would say give it a chance. Maybe go to Barnes and read a few chapters. And they're not really chapters. It's just like a chapter is maybe like 2-3 pages, and then there will be a couple poems or stuff like that. But maybe do that before getting this, because I believe this book was like almost $40. It is a really beautiful copy of a book. I have it on display out in my living room, but it is kind of expensive. The last book that I read this month, I actually just recently finished, and this is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Now this is a fantasy book. In this world, I'm sure everyone already knows what this book is about because this is very popular on BookTube, but I'm going to explain just in case you don't. In this fantasy world, our magic system is these magical playing cards that have magical abilities, obviously, and our main character has basically a demon in her head that talks to her, but it also protects her because there was this illness that went through the town. She ended up getting it, and basically they kill anyone who gets this illness because they end up getting magic, but she was able to survive. I have mixed opinions on this. I enjoyed the book, and I see why a lot of people really liked this book. I think I went into it with really high expectations because of how many people on social media really enjoyed this book. I don't think I'm going to continue with the story. I think I gave this a 3.5. I read this while I was at work actually, and I read it and then I listened to some of it on audiobook. I really did enjoy the audiobook, so I think maybe next month when my Spotify audiobook credits like renew, I might listen to the second book, but I'm definitely not gonna like go out of my way to buy it. It just was whatever. I think if I read this in the fall and if I was in more of a fantasy reading mood, I would have really enjoyed it. This just was possibly a right book, wrong time situation. But yeah, I would recommend this if you are into fantasies. This is definitely gothic fantasy. It's very easy to read. There is a romance in this, and so yeah, I read that. Those are all of the books that I read this month. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what books you read this month / what books are on your radar for next month. I'm currently reading Emily Henry's Funny Story, and I only read like 2 chapters last night, and I really have missed her writing. I really like it so far. Very excited for that next month. My TBR is right up here. I think I kind of want to get into Crescent City 3 next month. I have that up there. I just recently bought The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I don't think I'm going to be reading that anytime soon though, because Heather McClary said to save that for the fall time. I might be saving that. I don't really have many books on my TBR shelf right now for spring summer books, so maybe a reading vlog book shopping video will come this month. Let me know if you want me to do that. But yeah, thank you for watching. I love you. I'll see you in my next video.